Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled with today's guest. Joining us, we have Sitara Marin. She's a licensed mental health counselor based out of Washington State. Sitara, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've been watching what you guys have been doing, and it's an honor to be here. You guys are doing really great work, and this is such an important topic.
Thank you so much. We're very passionate about what we get to do and feel like it's a gift to help with normalizing those grief conversations. So, Sitara, do you mind introducing a bit about yourself and your background and maybe a bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Sure. So, like you said, licensed mental health therapist. I work with individuals ages 16 years old and up. And I use a Adlerian psychodynamic approach. And what that means is that my clients and I, we vacillate between the present day and the past. And we're looking through thought patterns and beliefs and values that kind of act as like an operating system for for clients and their current versions of themselves. So I use my background in counseling, in spiritual psychology, and also in sex therapy to give my clients a way of creating a new identity for themselves and give them the experience in their life that they want. And meaning that they reevaluate their beliefs and values and thought patterns and determine what needs to be updated, rewritten, or even removed from their sense of self.
Amazing. That sounds like a really powerful lens for identity and awareness of how we exist in the world.
For sure. We really get in the weeds. And people come and they're like, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's happening. And okay, let's start picking things out and going back in the past and seeing what is still operating, like the operating systems and thoughts, and what doesn't need to be there anymore, what needs to be changed. So,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. So, with the work that you do, one of your passion areas is talking about the loss of identity around death and non death losses. Can you tell me a little bit about what that means and how you see that showing up in therapy?
yeah. So, my clients come in with all sorts of concerns, but they tend to fall into these buckets of depression, anxiety, and trauma for the most part. And what we do is we find that area that is bringing them the most distress about themselves. And what we find is that there's usually something in there that needs to be updated about themselves. For example, an adult client wants to have a better relationship with their elder parent, but they keep getting into arguments. So we discuss what expectations they hold around their identity as a son or as a daughter, as well as the expectations they hold around their parents' identity as a mom or a dad. And so my client likely has an identity title from childhood. So it could be something like the peacekeeper or the good one. And so they need to release or give up that identity title in order to form a new relationship with their elder parent that can be healthy. So that's an example of a loss of this giving up of this identity title. Yeah.
And I think then that's not a loss that we anticipate is going to happen. We have these unwritten rules in our family systems and these unspoken roles that we're all filling, whether it's the peacemaker or the humor diffuser or the fixer, the outdoorsy one. Like we have these different roles or titles within a family system. And as we age and dynamics change, sometimes the roles have to change with it.
Yeah. And so if we're constantly going back into those roles and then having upsetness with ourselves about it because we're no longer that person, but we're defaulting into that role. So how can we give that up to be the new person that we want to be with that elder parent and form a new relationship as a new version of yourself and in that dynamic especially.
Right. And that can be hard to give up that old version of ourselves, which is where that grief piece comes in. Because we have to grieve who we were, how that relationship used to function. Even though there's not like a death related loss, it's still grieving a sense of self or identity.
A sense of responsibility. I am
Yeah.
responsible of being the good one. And if I'm not the good one, then who's going to take that role on? So it's my responsibility. And people give themselves a lot of pressure around these titles that they hold.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. So you use a specific model in your therapy practice. I think you said it's called the tier model. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So there is like an official tier model, and mine is a different derivative of it, and I probably should name it, I think. So it's slightly different. The tier model focuses specifically on loss of a loved one, and it goes into kind of discussing it as like this one-time staged event. And then once you get to the conclusion, then you can check the box and you're done grieving. And so the version that I have altered or that I've created is something we go through over and over again, and we realign and we readjust many times throughout our life and without a timeline, right? So the first part is it starts with acceptance. So even acknowledging that a loss has happened or is in the process of happening. And that's that understanding of I need to give up this identity title. So even acknowledging that this is, oh man, this is a thing that probably needs to happen.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. And I think what is different about my model is when there is the death of a loved one, it is this finite sort of thing. They were here and now they're not. And even though that process of here and not may happen over a period of time, it's still very final. They
Yes.
were here and now they're not.
Yes.
However, with different types of losses, it can be more ambiguous and it may not have an official ending. For example, the process of ending a romantic relationship, whether a marriage or long term partner or whatever, it's a long process of this thinking and this contemplating. And then maybe we end it, but we get back together and it's we're separated and it's not, it's a whole thing. The
Yeah.
divorce process takes a year, whatever, long, right?
Yeah.
Or another example is injury to the body. So
Mm.
an accident happens and you're like, oh, I just need to do PT. I just need to get this surgery. I just need to, but this injury could be permanent and your version of yourself may be very
Yeah.
at the end of it or even in the process of. Or another thing is deteriorating health and just thinking, oh, I just need to see that next specialist. I
Right.
just need to get that certain medication and I'll just get back to my old self. And so there's this desire to neglect this version of yourself to get back to the old version. And there's grief that needs to happen in that. So I say all of this because there's different types of grief. So the first part is even acknowledging that we need to there's a grief that needs to happen.
Yeah. There's some mourning that needs to take place. Like
Yeah.
this part of us, this identity is no longer serving us. And so we need to find a way to let it go. Yes.
And then another thing that I want to mention is many times we think that loss has to be tied to something negative, and that's not true.
Yeah.
So loss can also be in the form of something socially positive. So the birth of a new child, right? You are now permanently a parent. You will no longer be this individual, completely solo in this world, right? You are now responsible and attached to this other person for the rest of your life. That is a brain shift that needs to happen and this releasing of this old version of you.
Yeah.
Or even getting married. You, again, it's beautiful and it's wonderful and we're excited about it, but you are never going to be a single person in this world. You are now married and coupled and do
Yeah.
coupley things together.
So leaving those titles, the independence, yeah.
Right. So I also bring that up because a lot of times people will add guilt attached to this grief because they feel like they should be happy.
When really it's a both and. We can feel more than one thing about getting married, having a baby. Like those are complicated, transformative life events, and you can grieve the titles or the freedoms or the autonomy that you had previously, and that gets to be okay. It doesn't negate from the joy of those transformative life events. It's complicated, I think, and people want to make it this simple thing, and it's not.
Absolutely. Right. So that's again the first part.
First part.
Which is it's big, right?
It's big. It's not a small thing. Yeah.
And so then the second part is focusing on the loss. So once you, okay, this is a thing that's happening, accepting that and really allowing that grief to show up. And this is, of course, people can do this solo on their own, but it's great to do it with a therapist to bring up those sad and dark and negative thoughts or whatever those things are. It could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be shame, it could look all sorts of ways, but allowing it the space to look however it wants to look, to say those things out loud. And it is great to do it in a space where you don't feel judged, especially if it's like a should be happy.
Oh, those shoulds. I always tell my clients that's the only bad word in therapy is shoulds, because they're those external expectations that we're placing on ourselves. So
absolutely, yeah. Right. So just spending time in this like old version of ourselves, allowing it to feel sad, feel regret, feel whatever, feel all those things about it. So the acceptance part of the loss.
Yeah.
And then shifting into, and you could even vacillate between the two depending on the day, of the new. I am going to be a mother. I am going to be married. I don't know. Going to be divorced, right? like maybe that's, but this, okay, what is the new? So spending time in the old, and then what is the new? How does that feel? How does this person think and operate, this new sort of person who you've never been before, which is kind of, it's a concept in a way, right? I think I want to parent this way, or I think as a single person, when I go to a restaurant, this is how I'm going to eat dinner by myself, right? These are just like things.
Yeah.
So spending time thinking about this new version. And then the last part is the integrating of both. And to me, the integration is really important and kind of something that people tend to pish posh. Okay, I've grieved. And now I've switched over like it's a linear thing. And now I'm here. And so I can never go back there. And what I offer is to bring the both together. And I think about, I love the movie Inside Out because it's that memory, right? That is, oh, the joyful orb that then turns blue.
Yeah.
It's now sad. And so how can we, if we don't integrate both, then there can be resentment. I have to be this person now because that person has, gone away. I have grieved the old version of me and that sucks, right? And so there's like anger and resentment around the fact that we can no longer be that old person and we have to be this new person, instead of saying, man, and I'm using the mother example, like, man, my body was fit and trim and I was all the things. And then I had a baby and now my body is different and it looks different. But gosh, my body is just so good to me. And I love this new version of my body and all of its little oddities. And, it's definitely not what it was, but it ain't bad either. Right? Right? And having this sort of like appreciation and like warmth and joy about when you think about the old version of yourself.
I love that. Yes, and I think that I think especially that integration piece, I think that so I'm going to back up. You are giving name to all these different phases or things that need to be named, because we can't tame it till we name it. So we need to understand, like, okay, the change has happened. This is who I was. I can grieve that. This is who I am now. I can grieve that. And how do I hold space for both of those pieces? Like at the end of the feelings movie, we call it the feelings movie at our house. At the end of the feelings movie, when a new core memory comes out and it's yellow and blue intermixed together, it's not just one thing. And I think that's such a lovely model to make space for those different aspects of self, that we can both feel joyful at a new role and grieve the old role. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. So that's like the process that I take my clients through over and over again in different forms and aspects of their life.
Because our roles keep changing. And loss and shifting needs is a part of day-to-day life. Of course, you're going to go through that cycle over and over again. That's why
Exactly.
grief is not linear.
It is not.
Cycle. When thinking about grief and personal identity,
Mhm.
what would you suggest people do to explore that intersection of the two, especially when you might feel that pressure to return to who they were before? Because we know our brains like homeostasis. So it's, this is who I was before. So I'm going to try to be that person or that version of myself. Yeah.
Mhm.
What would you suggest for people?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I want my clients to consider, or for anyone to consider, is who is giving the pressure
Mm,
to be they were before. Is it society? Is it friends and family? Or is it ourselves? And sometimes we may not know where it's coming from. It might feel like, oh no, it's me. I'm the one giving the pressure. And is it really, right? And so getting to the bottom of that barrel. And I hold it in different spaces because if it's society or friends and family, then we work on creating boundaries
mm,
to say, hey, I am grieving on my timeline, not on yours. And how can we be brave enough to ask for what we need? I can't come out today. Like, I'm really not in the mood to go to the birthday party. But please ask me again how to, yeah, create boundaries and really set that up for yourself, which I think is easier for some people than others. For some people, they don't want to hurt other people's feelings, or they don't want to burden people with their grief, or they don't want to be this repetitive story over and over again.
mm,
And it's, can you ask for that? Can you say, I know I'm going to tell my story again, and I really just need you to be here? Or can we just, I know you want to go out to dinner, but can you come over instead and we can watch a movie? And creating that space for yourself. So that's when the pressure is friends and family. The social part, I think, is maybe what we see in jobs, or, oh, the time heals all wounds. Ah, that drives me nuts.
everything happens for a reason. No, it doesn't.
The reason, you can find a reason, and I guess
Sure.
make it mean something, but it isn't just like this arbitrary reason that will magically,
The minimizing platitudes. Yes.
right?
Yes. Like the time heals all wounds.
The time heals all wounds, and that's like the societal stigma
Yeah.
that happens. Understanding that you don't have to buy on, you don't have to sign on for those little societal statements and call BS on them when you need to. So that's why, who's giving the pressure? If the pressure is yourself, then we need to be gentle and
Yeah.
patient and be kind and notice the two different, or the conflict within ourselves. There's a part of yourself that's, I should be over this by now.
Mm,
What is wrong with me?
mm,
Why do I keep doing this? And then there's the part of you that's hurt. And it's just, this sucks. This hurts. I'm in pain. 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 And over again. And this one's, get over it. What's your deal? Sick of hearing your nonsense.
sure.
And so understanding that there's a conflict within ourselves, and to become the observer of the conflict. So almost like in a tennis match where you're just doing one of these,
Yeah.
right? and and the observer, the watcher, has no stake in any of it. So how can you sit more in the space of the observer and to notice this conflict, and then you are able to be more gentle? Wow, I see what's going on over there. That person is still hurting, and then I see her desire to want to move on. I see both, and I'm going to be here and I'm just going to watch. So that's the gentle part and the being kind to yourself.
In a similar vein, like when we think about self compassion and patience when someone's grieving, like the physical death of someone, and also that a part of themselves, how do you see self care showing up in that way?
As far as, I'm sorry, repeat the question.
No, it's question number 6, just coming with a reframe. So when you think about self-compassion and patience when someone's grieving the person they've lost and the person that they used to be, what's unique about self-care here? Like you mentioned being gentle. Are there any other self-care considerations or strategies that would be helpful in that space?
Yeah. I think in that first part, like when a loss first happens or you first notice that you're going through this grieving process, it's a lot easier. It's a
Mm.
lot easier to say, oh, I need time off of work, I need a spa day, or I need a girls' trip, or whatever the thing is. It's easier in that moment. It's when it becomes long term. It's when a month has gone by. The breakup happened a year ago. It's when the baby is 6 months old and you're still feeling this like sadness.
Yeah.
That's when the self care needs to be kicked up a notch and really start to understand the inner conflict that's happening inside of you. This and noticing like the difference between kind of your heart and your mind. Your heart is still in grieving mode. Your mind is telling you it's time to move on. I have other things to do. This is slowing me down. This is whatever, right? Why am I not motivated to go to work? Why am I not motivated to take the dog out? All of those things. Why do I just want to sleep or eat or whatever it is that we choose to do? Watch Netflix and
No.
scroll on our
Yeah.
phone. And so I think it's understanding that the short period, that immediate, we can get through some of that and we can get a lot of support in that short time span. It is when it becomes this drawn out part that we really need to notice. Okay, I'm in this. I'm still in this.
Yeah.
And I need to be even more compassionate with myself and do the things that just are gentle. And the self care thing I know is a hot button for people because it's like,
Right.
what does self care mean? And I would say just do no harm. You don't have to do the add on of the positive. You could just not do negative. How about that? Make your expectations of yourself so much lower. Like, just don't beat yourself up. Just make the coffee.
Yeah. I know. I talk about that with my clients a lot. Like you don't have to make it big. You can make it small. Okay, I'm gonna actually get up. I'm gonna make a cup of coffee and I'm gonna take a shower. And then okay, I've checked my 3 boxes for the day. That was my goal. That gets to be enough. And then everything else is like, all right, that's just bonus. Anything else I get done for the day. But I
Mm-hmm.
did the 3 things that I needed to. And some people might laugh at that, but really, like when you're in those funky headspaces, having a tiny, tangible routine just to give our brains something to latch onto can be a game changer.
Yeah.
And again, self care, it doesn't have to be the spa day or the girls' trip. It can be taking a shower. It can be making yourself coffee and putting, okay, I really like the peppermint Christmas creamer. I'm going to get the peppermint Christmas creamer. Like it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be simple and meaningful for you. That's not going to land for everyone, but that might land. Like you get to choose what fits best for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people need to, or not need to, but people think they need to add all these positive things. I need to smother the sadness with lots and
Yes.
lots of positive.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good visual. Smother the sadness.
Yeah,
I think that's where that like toxic positivity or doing
absolutely.
too much self care, not that there's really too much of a thing, but it's almost like you're not feeling any of your things because you're just focusing on the self care piece. You're neglecting the pain. Like we
Right.
have to find a way to process that out at some point. But if we're drowning in it, smothering it
Hmm.
isn't going to make it go away. It's
No.
just internalizing it and potentially leading to more chronic complications later.
Yes, for sure. So it's this the do no harm model.
Yeah.
Just don't beat yourself up. Don't do anything that's going to make things maybe more difficult or harder on yourself by guilting and shaming and being angry with yourself. Like none of that is going to help you get out of that space faster.
Yeah.
It's going to do the opposite, actually.
So true. When we think about our support network, our support
Mhm.
people, our loved ones, what would be some suggestions for them to support us when they notice we're grieving an identity piece or struggling with an identity transition? What would be some
Yeah.
suggestions there?
So I think this is really helpful for loved ones to be mindful. And it's difficult, right? Because again, the first part is this person even noticing or acknowledging that something is happening. And I think of a teenager, right? And mentally, as for a parent, they're like, oh, my teenager's going to be going through it. And you see them go through the ups and the downs, and you're able to just take a deep breath. Okay, we're 14 and we're going through it. We're able to have some grace for them.
Mm.
However, like I said, like we go through grief and transition all the time.
Yeah.
And so allowing our people, our friends, our family, our loved ones, our partners to show up differently sometimes. Maybe they respond to you in a slightly different way than they normally would, or they set this too strong boundary. And you're like, whoa, what was that? Hold on. Maybe something is going on for them and they're testing it out. Sometimes we overcorrect before
Swing
we
a little too hard the other way. Yeah.
find the middle. And so it's, no, I don't want to do that. And you're like, whoa, okay. That was a lot.
Yeah.
And just having some grace, right, with people as they are trying out different things, or they get really sad, or they get really angry about something that maybe doesn't make complete sense to you as the supporter. So how can we just create space? And it's, okay, what's going on? Are you all right? What's happening? Can we have some conversation? Can we back up? Can I say that over? How can we create space? And many times it's just letting them do their testing without judgment, without comment. They snap back. And did that snap back mean or do anything for you? Did it remove because they said no? Does that mean you're no longer able to have something, right? And I think a lot of times the no boundary, or whatever it is, the boundary that the person has set, probably doesn't do much for us. Okay, that's fine. I'll catch up with you later. Let it be. Can we let it go and allow them their boundary? Or did something actually happen to us? Oh, now that you've set this boundary, this affects my life in a very big way. And so now I have to come into conflict with you. Right?
Yeah. What would it be like to just say okay versus making it about us, when really, like, when
Right.
people are setting a boundary, it's not necessarily about us, it's about them trying to protect something for themselves, and it doesn't mean anything about us. It's just them trying to figure out a different way of navigating their world. Okay, so you swung a little hard, that's cool, like, I understand.
Yeah.
But I don't have to turn it into something bigger or push back or make it more, which then just makes it harder or gives them the message that, oh, I'm not someone they can set boundaries with in a safe way, which is going to make them go back into themselves even more, because it's like,
Right.
oh, okay,
As
like,
they're testing out their new identity title,
yes,
allow them that opportunity to test it out and be okay. Know what belongs to you and know what belongs to them, which I think is difficult. That's easier said than done.
absolutely. And I think you named it too, with working with adolescents or teenagers, they're allowed to be messy and like swing really hard other directions as they're figuring out what it means. It's harder when we're adults and we're not afforded that same grace to be messy as we're figuring out our identity pieces, as roles change. And
Right.
I love using teens as an example because there's grace there for the messy. And
Mm-hmm.
what would it be like if we allowed that for adults too?
Right. If we were in that space in a more long-term, maybe more permanent way, because none of us are permanent. We're not static. We're ever changing. And so being able to have grace for all the people in our life, whether teenagers or not. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so good. So, as we start to wrap up this conversation around identity and grief, what would be some final thoughts you'd have for someone who's in that tension of grieving their old self and stepping into that new chapter of who they're going to be moving forward?
Yeah, I think, and I was thinking a lot about this question because there's these nuanced little parts, right? Even though there's like the model that I spoke about. But the first thing I would say is to give yourself credit. Like you are noticing a change is happening, and oh my gosh, that's a really big deal. So give yourself a lot of credit
Mm.
that you even noticed it. The second is to understand that there is something on the other side. And that's death of all kinds, right? Okay, this part is gone, it's done. There's the death of a version of you, but there's also the birth of something new.
Yeah.
And yes, that's scary. but there's something there, and maybe there's some excitement in that too. And then the third I would say is you're not alone. And I think so many times we can feel isolated or that no one's going to understand. And even if it is grief of any kind, we have all experienced grief. And so even if I have not experienced the same type of grief as you, but I know what grief feels like. And so as I am talking to a friend or a loved one, I can access that version of grief and be in that space with you. And I could know too, as a person who is grieving, that I can reach out to someone else and they have experienced grief. Maybe not the same grief that I have had or the grief that I'm going through, but they know what it looks like. They know what it feels like, and they can understand me in some way. So I'm not alone in this. There are others. That's all of us. And not only are we not alone, but we're gonna, unfortunately, go through this again. So get comfy.
I love that. I think that's such a good reminder. Yeah, get comfy. We're not done till we're done. And buckle up, Buttercup. We're in for a ride and we're going to keep growing. We're not just stagnant creatures. Yeah.
Right. And I say that in the sweetest way, because sometimes people don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
Right.
Change is scary. Change is hard. Sometimes it doesn't always feel positive.
Yeah. And I think if understanding that grief is going to happen over and over again, it's not a checkbox and it's not something to repel from.
Yes.
So it's, hey, if we understand, all right, here we go, grief time, grief season. It's like, here we go. And just strap on and buckle up. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is that we're all going to go through it, and we're going to go through it multiple times. And it's not a thing to be feared. You can fear it, and you can add anger with yourself about it. You could.
Sure.
Not the happiest or one best way to go through this. But if you understand, okay, here we go. We're doing this again. Round 5, round 512. Then it's put on the gear, put on the helmet, and then you go into it with a lot of bravery and love for yourself.
And hopefully by time 512, you've got your toolbox with you this time. Like, you've got your comfy gear that I'm going to come through the other side. This is a hard moment, a transition moment. It's not a hard forever. Right. And if I've got the right tools and people around me, I'm going to navigate it. It's just a little stretchy. It's a little uncomfortable as I'm working through those growing pains.
Yeah. And then the version of you that comes out on the other side is scrappy, is tenacious, is strong, is confident. And it's, when you reach badass level. So I definitely support everyone. Let's get to badass level.
Yes. So as we close for today, Sitara, you're a pretty active presence on social media. How is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram. They can find me Sitara Marin Therapy. And then in my bio, there's links to my website. There's other interviews that I've done if they want to get more information about different areas that I have expertise in. Identity is definitely where I butter my bread, but there's identity of all forms. So I've talked about everything from grief with you to parenting to men's mental health to disability. So there's just identity of all different forms, and I definitely want to talk about all of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for such a great conversation today. Just showing up such authenticity and such great language to give us more tools to grieve how we change. So Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, listeners, thank you for tuning in today. Remember to be kind to yourselves, and we'll see you next time. That's all for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If today's conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share it with someone who might need it. And if you're looking for more support or resources, feel free to head over to The Morning Movement, where we continue to build community and normalize these hard, beautiful parts of life. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and until next time, be kind to yourself. Opening and closing music is provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, collaboration, or training opportunities, feel free to email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. And podcasts are also now available streaming on YouTube.